Hello students and welcome to week 3 uh, lecture. This week we're going to talk about Porter's five forces model, and this model comprises of five various elements, and the first element is the threat of new entrants. So we're talking about an industry. For example, we can talk about the automobile industry or the car industry, and the first element is a threat of new entrants. The second is bargaining power of buyers. Third, threat of substitute products or services. The fourth would be bargaining power of suppliers. And the fifth would be rivalry among existing competitors. And this represents the industry and various components that make up the industry, and shows how dynamic the industry actually is. Um, so the function of the five forces model, this model identifies and analyzes five competitive forces that shape every environment or every industry. They help to determine an industry's weaknesses or its strength, and the particular ways to determine an industry's weaknesses or strength. Um, if an industry is very competitive, if it's not so competitive, we can judge and say the industry is weak or it's strong. So the first component would be the competition in the industry. Is it strong? Is it weak? The second one would be the potential of new entrants into the industry. Right? Is it easy for new companies to enter the industry? Right? The power of suppliers. Are there many suppliers in the industry? The more suppliers, the greater the power of the suppliers. And the less suppliers means that these suppliers are going to be relied upon the business even more. So when it comes to the power of suppliers, we have to take that into consideration. The power of customers, the greater amount of customers in industry, uh, the greater the power of customers, because these customers can bargain, they can negotiate prices, they can negotiate features of products. They do have a greater voice in the industry. Threat of substitutes. Um, the more substitute products that are available in an industry, it means that the industry may not be as strong as everyone thinks it may be. For example, um, if let's say looking at China, let's say that when we look at the automobile industry in China, it may not be as strong because bicycles may be a threat. If someone can't afford a car or gas prices are too high, then obviously they're going to buy a bicycle and ride, which is commonplace in China. So these are the five forces that affect an industry, any type of industry. So looking at competition in industry, and the greater the number of competitors, the stronger industry is, the greater the rivalry, the more intense the rivalry. If these competitors are very large, the rivalry is going to be increased also because these competitors are going to be stronger. Product differentiation, this just means that uh, products may be distinct from each other or maybe superior. For example, if you look at Mercedes-Benz and Elantra, Mercedes-Benz is a much uh, more reliable product. It's a product that has been more esteemed by buyers in the market. So it is a differentiated product. So based on that, it creates greater competition in the industry. Diversity of competitors, the more diverse competitors in the industry, the less competitive they are. And the more similar competitors are, the greater is going to be that competition in the industry because they will be competing for the same uh, market or the same customers because they create the same goods and services. Buyers switching cost. These could be the amount of money a buyer would pay to switch from one business to the next. It may include an increase in price. It may include psychological costs. even working with one firm all these years and all of a sudden having to work with another one. Also, there exist barriers, and if it's difficult for a competitor to leave the industry, it means that the competition industry is going to be higher because more competitors are going to be forced to stay in the industry. Um, if selling off assets and getting rid of various parts of the business is very difficult, then that means that the exit barriers are going to be very high. So they have to stay in that particular industry and continue competing. Potential for new entrants into the industry. There's something called barriers to entry. New businesses may want to enter industry, let's say the car industry, and Toyota may have an operation where the more cars it produces, the cheaper it is. So that creates an advantage. It's called economies of scale. And a new competitor coming in may not have that benefit yet of economies of scale. So they may not be able to compete as efficiently as Toyota. So they may not be able to enter into that industry. Also, as mentioned before, product differentiation. The greater a product is differentiated or distinguished, the greater the competition in the industry, and therefore it's difficult for new entrances into the industry. Capital requirements sometimes start off automobile business. It takes a lot of capital, plant, equipment, machinery. So it means that the barriers are going to be very high. So not many people are going to be entering that car industry. Also, access to distributors and distribution channels. The few businesses that are already in the industry, they have capitalized on these distribution channels. So it would be difficult for new companies coming in to muscle in on those distributors and those channels. Also, government policies and rules, regulations change every so often. And businesses that are already existing in the industry, they have already put mechanisms in place to follow these policies. So new businesses coming in would have to adjust to these policies, which may not be very easy. So barriers to entry for that new business is going to be very high. Also, switching costs to buyers. If switching costs to buyers are very high, then entering industry is going to be very difficult again. So those are some of the things that we have to look at. Power of suppliers. Some of the variables that tell us whether the power of suppliers in industries is high or low, it depends on the number of suppliers in the industry. If there's a lot of suppliers, then the power of suppliers is going to be great because they can negotiate, they can command price, and all these various things. Also, the availability of substitute. The more substitutes that for products that are in an industry, the weaker the industry is going to be. So as we mentioned before, as in China, if there are bicycles, roller skates, scooters, whatever the case may be, for people to get from one place to the next, that can substitute a bike or bicycle. Also, suppliers' product differentiation. So the more distinct the product is, the greater the power of the suppliers. Also, the importance of the supply input. Some manufacturers have to use distinct products or distinct parts or raw materials to have that final, or to produce that final product. And only some suppliers have that. So that creates another issue in terms of supplier power. And also, if a supplier wants to forward integrate, or if a supplier wants to have its own distribution, that creates a problem in that particular industry. Power of buyers. Also, as mentioned before, if there are a large number of buyers related to sellers, then the buyers' power can be increased and become a much stronger industry. Availability of substitutes. Okay, buyers can abandon that particular product and go with substitutes. So it means that the buyer power is going to be increased. Suppliers produce product differentiated. So All these variables um, also determine how powerful a buyer is in the particular industry. And finally, threat of substitutes. As before, if the price of substitutes are cheaper, for example, buying a bike in China is going to be much cheaper than buying a car. So it means that substitutes are going to be always available, and it's going to push down the demand for these other products. And the quality of substitutes, if they are almost the same, for example, if you if you can ride a bike in China and you can reach your destination, let's say in 10 minutes more than driving a car, then that wouldn't be such a bad idea. So that determines that in that way.